July 15th, 2025 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you have it's always helpful if you could indicate which version of Cubase you're running. So if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, which version number. So if it's going to be version 12, 13, or 14. And also which operating system. And so if you're running on Mac or Windows, that information is often helpful. We should have an index of all of the topics that will be discussed in today's live stream, pinned several hours after the live stream ends to the top of the comments field. After asking your question, if you don't see an immediate response to a question, realize that my ability to answer questions in a real-time manner may soon be eclipsed. So if we could avoid asking the same questions over and over again, until we get to that question, that would be appreciated. Just kind of slows down the whole process. And with that, so if we could avoid asking the same question over and over again, we'll go through all the questions chronologically as asked. And if you want to send questions in advance, you can send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de if it's something a little more involved. We have two, if you want to search for topics that have been covered on previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan, who's on as Cubase Index Jan, for creating a website where you could just search, and we've covered over 40,000 different topics. We also want to give special thanks to two people as service moderators. We have Jazz Dude and Agent K. So they're not Steinberg employees. They just do this out of the goodness of their hearts to make it a better communal and a better community experience. So we'll give special thanks to them. Also, we'll give extra special thanks to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. It's a great resource of for people in the Steinberg community. So you're looking for kind of a collection of tutorials and links and articles. It's a great place to learn more about Steinberg products. So you could be a power user. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I am the host of the live stream today. I'm presenting from in the United States, just outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching live or watching afterwards, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, so we see Tim K joining from Zeist in the Netherlands. His cat Buddy is waving a paw hello to all the other pets nearby. We see Jazz Dude on. We have Jan from Cubase Index. And we see the artist known as Love. Just says, hope everyone's doing great. Thank you for all you do, Greg. I've hit the like button. All right, we see Tony Trunzo joining from Australia. We see Soren. It says from Sweden joining. Thanks for being online with us. All right, so we see Roland Stuff says, greetings from a windy Sussex on the south coast of England. Hope you're well, Greg, and to all the Cubasers. And we see Balsa checking in from Montenegro. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have a question from Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas, who just says, I'm still trying to get the file thing figured out. When opening a project, what is the difference between open, other, and create empty? Which is the best to use? Okay, so when I go to open a project, I would generally just come over here to open. And if we choose a particular project here, so let's say I'll just open up this project. So I'm going to navigate here within my Windows Explorer or Mac OS Finder and just say, okay, I want to go to this particular project, and we're going to activate this project. So if we have another project open, When we activate it, this will be activated. So my previous project that was open becomes deactivated, and you could see which project is active by just coming over here, and you'll see like kind of the one, we see this activate project icon in the upper left hand corner of the project window. Kind of looks like maybe a lightning bolt, and at that point you could click there, and that would make that the current active project. So we could open that way, and there's also create empty. So, and this might be also when we come over here, let's say if we do a new project as opposed to opening, we have the option here to use a default location. So we could have all of our files go into a particular folder. And so this could place it into kind of a known folder. But generally what I would do here is just to come over, and if we're in a new project, and this is maybe where the open other is. So if I was opening a project from the hub, I could say, let's open another project, and then I could open up the project right from here, just directly from the hub itself. So we could choose, in this would mimic the same function that we see here in the file menu to open. If it is a recent project, we will see recent projects if we click on the recent tab here, that we could see the recently opened projects listed here. And if it's in a recent project, then you could just double click and open up the project directly from here. When we see create empty, this create empty is not going to open an existing project, but is often used to start a brand new project. So when I click on create empty here, it's going to ask me, depending on my choice. So let's say if I go to my hub, right now, if we have use default locations, if I create empty, then we have an empty project that's going to go into this particular path. The default behavior since Cubase 11, I believe, switched it over to prompt for project location. So now when we create empty, so open other is going to open an existing project. When we're starting a brand new project, we would probably just choose to create empty. And as we create empty, at this point, we could just choose our folder that we want our project to go into. So we would say, okay, I want to create a new folder. And generally, it's always good to have a, so we'll call it Dallas LaRue. So now I'm going to select this folder, and as I record audio into it, it will go into the Dallas LaRue folder into an audio subfolder. So when dealing with the hub, if you wanted to start a brand new project, click on create empty, and open other would allow you to open any other project that you would just navigate through your File Explorer or your Windows Explorer or Finder on Mac OS. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Dallas. All right, we have the morning lounge with Joe and Rich. Says still working in West Palm. So thanks for joining us. We have Recyclops joining from Finland. It says for once he's on time. All right, so we have Tori Berglund saying hello from Norway. Thanks for joining us today, being part of our community. All right, we have David McKay, a good friend from Nashville. Hope you're doing well, Dave. Enjoying your summer. All right, we have Uno Mementos checking in from Estonia today. Thanks for joining. And we have Bratman Studio joining from Uptown Whittier, California. Razel Zamini from Denmark. Okay, so Balsa asks, in Media Pool, when removing unused media, will Cubase erase files that are on disabled hidden tracks? So let's take a look. So we'll create empty here. And let's just add some audio tracks. Okay, So we have audio 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so we'll go ahead and just record. Okay, so right now, if we go into, open up our pool window, so we see our 4 audio files. Now, let's say if I erase a file from here and we go to our pool, we see that we now have 3 files, and that the 1 file is placed into the trash. So if we undo my move, we open up the pool again, we can see that that's in the particular project. So if I erase, let's say, track 4, and let's say that I'm going to disable track 3, and let me hide track 3. Okay. Make sure I'm okay. So we're going to disable and hide track 3. All right. So right now we have 2 active projects in the folder. So we look at our pool window. We still see our 3 windows. Let's go to Media menu and prepare archive. So just because it is, or let me remove unused, sorry, wrong function. So we remove unused media. All right, so we could say, let's put it in the trash. Okay, so even though the file here, since it's still part of the project, even if it is disabled, it could still be referenced and enabled in the project. That will not be deleted. So when it's erased from the project, not hidden or disabled, the remove unused media will still leave it in the pool. But if it has been erased, so I erase it, we open it up, we see tracks 3 and 4 are now in the pool, in the trash. And now if we remove unused files, so again, we'll just come here to media to remove unused media. We could remove it from the pool or put it in trash. And so let's say if we remove from the pool, I'll remove from pool instead of putting it in trash. It's already in the trash. So let's remove it from the pool. And then when we go to empty trash, we could just choose to remove this from the pool so it doesn't reference, but the files are still there. And if we wanted to, so if we look in the particular folder, we would see those files, but they're just not referenced in the pool. But then if we chose to erase them, then they're erased from disk. So just because a track is hidden and disabled, it's still available to play back in a project. It won't be removed with the remove unused media. Okay. All right. Wonderful to see Tim Weinheimer checking in from Mission Viejo. All right. Roland Stuff asks, hi, Greg. When generating harmony voices, what's the best way to make sure harmonies are influenced by the chords of the song? Can a chord track be referenced, and will VariAudio still work? Thanks. Yep. So let's go ahead and just open up an example here. So the harmony generation is going to be, based a lot on the chord track itself. So sometimes harmonies won't be generated correctly without a chord track. So let's say in this example, so let's go ahead and all right, so I'm going to take the piano part, and this could be an audio part or a piano part, and I'm going to drag it up to the chord track, and then it's automatically figured out our chords from the audio or MIDI file here. So once we do this, so I'm going to select this phrase here. So let's just say where she says, "Tell me why." And now what I'm going to do is just come right over here and go to audio to generate harmony voices. And let's say we want to have 3 harmony voices. And as we do this now, so now those harmonies are going to be musically correct because we had the chords as kind of the foundational basics. So it knew where to generate the harmonies from. So if we'll take that as an example, so let's say this. Now let's say I go to my chord track and we don't have a chord track. So I'm going to undo and let's choose to not have a chord track. And I'm going to take that same phrase and let's try to generate harmony voices and we'll listen to the result. So we hear like 3 voices of unison because there is no chord track, but as soon as we enable the chord track and we generate the harmony voices, right there, now it knows how to generate, how the harmonies should work automatically because it's referencing the chords. And then if you say, okay, I don't want a soprano, I want this to be, we could change the voicings of particular tracks as well. So if you wanted to just come over here and say, like, give me a alto 2, instead we could just change the harmony voice. So the chord track is kind of intrinsically linked to the generate harmonies function from the audio menu. So let me know if that makes sense for you rolling stuff. All right, so we see from Dallas LaRue says that was helpful. I don't know why trying to wrap my head around the files thing keeps getting over my head. So yeah, once you kind of figure out your method, I think it'll make sense for you. But yeah, and there's a lot of files of places that could go wrong. All right, so we see Benny's on his way to Mallorca. So have a great time. Spend some time in that part of Spain on the eastern Spanish coast near Mallorca in Gandia when I was in high school for a couple weeks. A great time. All right. Artist known as Love wants people to hit the like button. We see John Costigan saying hello to me and the Cubase Nation from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Thanks for joining us. All right, Shego Moing says, hi Greg, from Cape Town. I'm using Cubase 12 Pro, Cubase Session, CPRs balloon upwards of 1 gigabyte in size when I save them. What could I be doing wrong? Usually happens if I have to make lots of edits. Okay, so one of the things that could really kind of creep up in size is if we have done, let's do a project here, is sometimes when you're using like ARA extensions, like spectral layers, that could cause, so let's come over here, let's create a new folder. So we'll say projects and we'll go to our Hangouts. And we'll do a new folder for today. So we'll call it July 15, 2025. Okay. So I'm going to import an audio file here. I'll just trim the beginning of this. Okay, so let's bounce selection. So we're going to call this file size test. So we will come over here, let's save as. Okay, so let's look at the file size in our Finder here. It's not going to show up there. Okay. Okay, so right now our project is 330 kilobytes, so small, you can fit on an old floppy disk. So let's go ahead and just take a quick listen to it, and we will do something like this. We'll do an unmixing in spectral layers. So let's come over here to the inspector. Let's do a quick unmixing. So we'll just give a quick listen to it here. All right, so let's get spectral layers. And we'll go to our modules. And let's unmix the song. Give it a couple minutes here. So sometimes when we're doing certain ARA tasks, there's nowhere for all of the other information to go. So all the information that's kind of generated by the external editor under ARA, sometimes all of those settings are just stored inside of the Cubase project, which can balloon the size a bit. All right, so we'll let this do its magic here. So again, we're at 330K, so very small. All right, so just about another minute or so, minute 40 seconds. Nice that we have a timer now in spectral layers, 12. All right, we'll let this do. So basically what this is doing, if you're not familiar with spectral layers, is unmixing the song so that we can take the different elements of the mix and split it out. All right, we've done here about 45 seconds. All right, we see Mark Rabin. I just saw popped in, so everyone will give a big woof to Stella while we're waiting for Spectral Layers to do its magic here. Thanks for joining us, Mark from Montana. And Tim K's cat, his buddy, has already waved hello to Stella. All right, it's about 20 seconds. All right, about 5 seconds ago. All right, so just about done. Okay, so now we could just kind of listen to, so what Spectral Layers does, if you're not familiar, is we can now just... So I'm going to save as, and we'll say file size test, post Spectral Layers, SL. Okay, so let's come over here to all right, so we see that now this file size has gone from 330K to 437.3 megabytes. So if you're doing a lot of processing, so now let's say if I come over and we choose to go to our ARA settings and we say make track extensions permanent, and now we'll save, we'll see what this does. So we'll say and we see that once we have made the them permanent, we can see that we went from 330K to 370K from 437. So if you're doing a lot of ARA work with like Melodyne or Spectral Layers or other ARA tools, Vocal Line, consider making them permanent, and then that should minimize the file size for you. All right. Thanks for the question. All right. Okay, so Gulf Coast, Florida man, great to see you on. Says, how do I freeze and unfreeze tracks? Heard that saves RAM space while working on things. All right, so let's say if I have we'll just open up a virtual instrument track here. Okay, so let's say now I'm working on this and I just want to hit record, and we will, let me just check my routing here. Okay, so we have, let's say this is taking a lot of audio performance from our system. So if we have audio that has plugins on it, so let's say I want to take this song and throw let's just throw something painfully obvious on it. So let's say I want to take this, and while it's playing, all right, so if we want to freeze tracks, what you could do is you'll see this little icon, kind of looks like a snow, looks like a little piece of snow here, and that will allow you to freeze channels. And when we freeze channels, what it's going to do, and we could do this for multiple tracks as well. So we go to our project. I think it's in the project menu, maybe the edit menu. So we could just say freeze selected tracks. So instead of this playing back and processing like the flangers or the instruments in real time, what this will do is when we come over here, we'll just say freeze the selected tracks, and that's going to render it as an audio file. So now instead of it doing real-time audio performance, now when tracks are frozen, we can't necessarily move or edit them. So we could delete, but if I wanted to move this would be kind of locked into space. And then if we want to again unfreeze them, we just come right over here and we could just say unfreeze the selected tracks, and we could delete. So basically what the freeze is doing, it's rendering in the background. We still see the representation as it was, but instead of this playing back something that causes audio performance usage, it's just playing back a simple audio file in its place. So you could do it directly from the edit menu if you want to do multiple tracks, and it came in 12, I think, long-standing feature request, or if you want to do it on a track-by-track basis, you could just click on the little snowflake icon right there on an audio or instrument track. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, Bohan Polovina asks how to separate keyboard Novation MK49 for two instruments. On one side Hallion, the other side Pad Shop. Okay, so let's come over here and let's say we want to go to an instrument track. So let's open up a Hallion. I'll just do a Hallion Sonic since everyone owns that if you're a Cubase user. All right. So let's say I want to just come over here. I want, let's say, a Wurlitzer on, and let's open up an instance. So we have kind of a Whirly, and let's open up an instance of Pad Shop. So we'll come over here. All right, so I want my left hand, let's say the low notes here, to play back on the Wurlitzer sound, and the high notes to play back in this Pad Shop sound. Let me just see if I can find even cooler Pad Shop. All sorts of amazing sounds. Okay. So what we want to do is to split the keyboard. So we would go to the routing tab, and then we see this little icon here for the input transformer. Okay. So what I want to do is, let's say we're going to open that up, and we're going to assign this at the track level. And as we come over here, we choose to open the panel. So we're going to choose in the bottom right hand corner, we want to filter, and we'll click on insert. We want to filter notes. Now what notes do we want to filter? So we're going to say subtype, and we're going to say the pitch is less or equal to, and if you actually just kind of click here, activate that, I'll say C3. Okay, so what this is going to do is filter out any note we'll say is bigger or equal to C3. Okay, so what this is going to do is now when this is active, the pitch as soon as we go above C3 on the instrument. So we'll see our instrument here. So it's filtering out those particular pitches. And we want to kind of do almost the opposite for an input transformer on this track. So we could say, okay, let's go to our track input transformer, open panel, activate the module, and we can have 4 different modules if you want. We're going to filter notes, and the notes we want to filter are less or equal to, and again, you could just actually just hit the key from your controller. Oh, not the velocity, but the subtype, sorry, is less or equal to C3. So now with both of these tracks, so notes down here, and when I play up high, so again, we just want to use the input transformer to filter out. We want to make sure that this module is checked, otherwise it won't do anything. Type is equal to note, and then click insert again. You're going to select subtype, and the subtype of a note message is the pitch. And we can say less or equal to C3. And then so this is filtering out everything below C3. And when we come here, we want to filter out everything. And again, it's going to be done in the routing. So we'll say open the panel. And here we want to say everything bigger or equal to C3. So at that point, we could just split between 2 instruments. So my one controller, the MIDI messages are automatically filtered on those particular instruments. So let me know if that's helpful and does what you want to accomplish. All right, so we see Balsa asks, Greg, can you show render export multi-outputs of VST instruments as separate tracks? Okay, so let's say I'm in my Hallian Sonic here. We'll just move this up top. And let's say my Hallian Sonic, I have my Wurlitzer here on channel 1. Let's do a synth for channel 2. So I want an anima. All right, let me just come here. So when you go to channel 2 here, we'll have, and let's go to channel 3 and say we want this to be the Etude Grand Piano, wonderful instrument, Steinberg released recently. Okay, and we'll do one more. And let's say an FM sound from FM7, which comes with Hallian. So all right, so I'm going to go ahead and, so right now I have 1 instrument track. I'm going to add 3 MIDI tracks starting on channel 2. All right, so we'll say, so this will automatically increment the output. So I'm going to just draw in, let's say, a couple measures of nonsense notes here. So we'll start off with okay, so we have that, and what I want to do is I'm going to just drag this out so that I make a copy here. I'll make a copy here, and we'll split these out. So when we listen to this quickly, we'll have kind of our the Rhodes, going into Anima, piano, and then... Alright, so when we want to render these to separate outputs, the key is that they need to actually be on separate outputs within the instrument. So I'm going to come over here and we'll just say mix, and we're going to say this is going out of our main output, this is going out of output 2, output 3, output 4. So when we go to our mix console in the lower section of our screen and we listen to it, we'll see we'll see that this will now, with the piano, will come here. And then we'll have the FM synth sound. Alright, so now at this point, if we want to render these, all we would have to do is just come over, and as we, let's say, render in place, we go to our render settings. We want to make sure that we have the channel settings. We could do these as one event. I'm not going to mix down. We'll say render. So we have these events selected. Say render in place. And now we could just have those rendered in place. Now sometimes if you're running multiple outputs through MIDI tracks, you may notice that you may have empty tracks because the MIDI doesn't really know exactly where it's being sent out to, so you may have to just kind of delete the empty tracks, but that's how you could render them. So just go to make sure that the instrument itself is being sent to multiple outputs, and then when you render in place, they'll all be rendered independently of each other. All right, so we see Tony Trunzo says, Greg, I noticed when I use Spectral Layers Pro and ARA and save the Cubase project, my Windows C drive is only 128 gigabytes. It takes a lot of space. Is there a way to save the Spectral Layers edits to another drive? So the edits would go exactly where, as you could see, as we showed before, the Spectral Layer edits will go into the project window, or like wherever the project was defined. So if you're running short on hard drive space, so let's say if we come here, we go to July 15th, we can see that the large project size here is in the wherever the project folder is started. So if you start the project on a different drive, it will automatically be stored on the different drive. If you want to, if you're at the point where you have the entire project and it's on your C drive and you're running out of space, if you have an external drive, just simply come to your file menu, go to backup project, and when you do a backup project, it's going to prompt you to make a new folder, make the new folder on a different drive other than your 128 gigabyte drive, and then that will automatically move all of the files and contents directly over. It will copy that and make new versions onto the new drive location that you specify. So at that point, you could get rid of the files from the original drive on the C location once it's backed up. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so we see from Dallas LaRue, says, I asked this question on the last Hangout, but I think you missed it, sorry. It says, when using Spectral Layers 12 in ARA, it locks up, but it works fine when standalone. So let me know if, like how much, if you're running low on space, if this is on your old computer or a new computer. But most of the time it works, it works fine. But, sometimes having large project files, and if you don't have a lot of RAM in your system, having a project file that takes a lot of memory at that point could kind of lead to system instabilities that the system is looking for and is kind of almost seeking out more RAM. So, but let me know like how much RAM you have, and if you save the project file like we just showed, like how big the project is. And if you try also doing, if you have a project on a separate drive, if that changes the behavior. All right, Channel Ripoff asks, hi G, say I have a vocal and I want to have the vocal effect track right below it. How can I use the range tool, select a word, and have it, and how can I use the range tool to select a word and have it cut, copied, and brought down to the track below for effects? Thanks. Okay, so let's just jump back to a different project here. All right, so I think we could make a macro to do this. All right, so let's say I have my vocal and I want to add a track, and we'll make it a mono track and we'll call it vocal effects. Okay, so I think if we want to select this and basically move it down to this track. All right, so say I have this set with the range. Let's see if we could just build a macro here quickly. All right, so I think we could do this. So go to your edit menu to key commands, and you want to make sure that the macros are visible here. All right, we're going to make a new macro, so we can just click on new macro. So I think what we want to do is we're going to say split range. All right, and then we're going to add that command. Let's go to, we're going to switch to the object tool. So we're going to go to the object selection tool, add command. All right, and then I think if we go to nudge down, all right, let's see if it's this one. All right, so we have this, and all right. All right, let me just look for down, those nudge. All right, just gonna try to nudge down. I'm just gonna check see if this is the okay. All right, so that's the command we want. Okay. Okay, so let's say we want to split the range. And then just get my all right, so let me try the macro again here. So I think this looks like it should work. Let's give it a shot. All right, let me see if I don't do it with. Okay, let me remove that. All right. All right, so I'm going to select that, and let's do just this macro here. Yeah. All right, so make the macro, and you want to do so we're going to say edit split range, tool, the object selection tool. So we're going to switch from kind of the range tool to the object selection tool, and then nudge down. So if I come here, I want that. Let's run the macro, boom. And then that will be on the effect track. So again, just select the range that you want to move down, run the macro, boom. So let me know if that's helpful. Okay. Channel ripoff just reminds people, don't forget to hit the like button. All right, we have Ignorant Gospel Music, says Matthew from Nigeria, just purchased Cubase 14. Please can you put me through, let me see if there's a follow up with that. I don't see follow up, so maybe let me know what you need. Yeah, maybe if you could give some more information, just to make sure. Let me. All right, so Matthew, if you get a chance, maybe you say, can you put me through if you have a question. Yeah, I see Jazz Dude posted links to some other tutorials and some other helpful stuff. All right, so we see from Roland stuff, just says that was really helpful, Greg. I didn't realize you had to have the chord track to generate harmonies. I thought maybe it analyzed other instruments in the project if there wasn't one. Thanks. Yeah, so you could take any instrument that has chords, drag it to a chord track, or it's MIDI or audio, and then use that as the basis for the harmonies. All right. So, all right. See everyone saying woof to Stella, Mark Rabin's dog. Glad to see you on, Mark. Glad you can make it today. See Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. Always wonderful when Michael is on, because that means virtual ice cream distribution will begin. All right, Balsa asks, Greg, can you show how we can live snap input in the Scale Assistant, record only notes from the chord track? Does it automatically switch to live pitch snap as chords are changing in the chord track? All right, so let's say we have let me just okay, so let's say we have our chord track here. I'm just going to do a quick divide track list. All right, so let's say we'll put our chord track up top here. And let's come to, all right, so I'm going to just do a new track version here. All right, so let's say we want, come over, all right, so say we have G. So right now I can pretty much do any notes, whether it's in key or not. So if I'm in a key of G major and I want an F natural and a B flat, so that's my G. So instead of, so let's go ahead and set this scale. So I'm going to come over here and let's go to our Scale Assistant. And we can say, okay, I want to use the chord track and snap live input. So I'm going to come over here and we could, quantize the pitches, and we can say, I only want this to be notes in the chords. So I'm going to come over here and let's say, okay. I'll go ahead and record some of my data in here. So we'll see in the bottom. All right, so I'm just going to play everything in the key of, let's do the key of F major. Okay, so I'm going to record in. So let's say. So now as I play, so if I just play, I'm playing the same notes on the piano. So I'm just playing a G major chord, and as I play, and I'll just start over so I'm going to play an F major chord here. And it's going to automatically just snap because I have this set to use the chord track. And we're only going to have the chord track mode set to chords. So as we go ahead and play. So I'm just going to play an F major chord. All right. So now as we do this, it's only going to, when we look at the chords, it is now automatically mapped, even though so as soon as we do our snap live input, at that point it's going to automatically follow the chords. Now another method that you could do if you wanted to follow the chords is and we don't have to do this in the Scale Assistant, but let's say if I have like a string patch here, So if I have, let's say, I could just come over here to the chords, and then there is a live input on the chords. So if I now come over, and I'm just going to do this string part, and let's do it with the original piano. So we say, okay, I'm just playing a C major triad. So I'm playing one set of chords, one chord, and now it's automatically mapping that chord directly to the chord track. So if I keep playing a C major chord, that way it will automatically snap to the chords. So you could do it from the scale assistant, or if you could just do it right here from the chords tab, the inspector tab, and do your live input to the chords right there. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Balsa. All right, so Mark Rabin has received 1 gallon of Mexican hot chocolate ice cream from Michael Teams. Sounds good. All right, so we see Mike Peterson just says Cubase 14 Pro. Thanks for joining, being with the community today. All right, so we see Gulf Coast Florida Man says thank you for the demonstration and explanation. So you're welcome. What part of the Gulf Coast of Florida? I'm not sure if you mentioned it earlier, but spent a lot of time in Tampa and Fort Myers and Sarasota area. All right, Tellerista de Graffitis just says hello. Thanks for joining us. All right, Mike Peterson has a question. It says Cubase 14 Pro toolbar speaker icon works only on MIDI tracks and not on analog, maybe audio. So if we come over here and we go to click on, we have our speaker track here. So probably if you're in Cubase 14 Pro, come over to your audio connections, and that's going to be routed through the control room. So come over here, make sure that you activate the control room. And at this point, if we just, so I'm going to deactivate it. So if we go to our outputs here, we can say, okay, my stereo out is going through these outputs through to my monitoring system or console. So now when I go to play, so if you don't hear it here, and then you may have a setting where to make it like the main mix. So if you make sure if you come here that you set stereo as main mix, if not, you may not hear it. But generally the preview will go through the control room. So if you don't hear it, try activating the control room. And then you want to add a monitor. And when we come over here, we can say, let's go to like here, and we could just label, and we could think of a monitor as a speaker monitor. And then you could label it, like I have mine labeled as HS7, the Yamaha Great Speakers. So we'll come over here to the UR, and then I set my routing there, and then we can hear. Now, if you set up the control room, one thing to be aware of is it probably makes sense to set the output to not connected. It seems counterintuitive at first, but set the output to not connected. Otherwise, the audio could be bussed through the main outputs and the control room and kind of be doubled up. So try going to the control room, make sure it's activated, add a monitor, and then this would also enable like your preview of, different loops. And if we have this set to play, so we could just automatically preview different loops as well. So you could just
feel the weight.
So give that a try, Mike. All right, Daniel Bader asks, hello, Greg. Is there a way to recall my external effects IOs? It keeps getting worse, reconfigured to the default as I change sound interfaces. So one thing to try to do with your external effects is we come over to our audio connections. So if we have an external effect, try to right click over here and add to favorites, and I believe that may recall the output routing for you. So if you go back to your other connection, just then at this point you just want to go to your favorites and say, okay, I want to go to my lexicon, and that would I believe that will recall the routings for you. I could try it on my system where I have some external effects configured, but try right-clicking on the effect and adding it to a favorite, and then you could recall the favorites right there. All right, you see Mark Rabin saying nice things about Jazz Dude for sharing his knowledge, and I like his term edutained me. So that's a good one. I'm going to steal that, Mark Rabin, but I'll give you credit every time. See, Tim K says, I have a couple guitars nearby because it's sometimes fun to jam along with whatever Greg is up to. Sometimes the beats or loops are a lot of fun, as we all know. So yeah, it's like school where you can play your guitar along with school. What we all wanted as kids for us younger musicians. All right. All right, so Roland Stuff just says the knowledge just keeps flowing. I knew nothing about input transformers until now, so thanks for the question, Bohan, and thanks for the answers, Greg. So yeah, I think it's great that you learn. People can learn a lot from other people's questions if you haven't gotten to that point yet, but you can see possibilities and how to solve potential future issues so you can work more efficiently. All right, so wonderful to see Michael Marshall checking in from Somerset in the UK. All right, so we see channel ripoff just says I hit option and dragged it down and it worked. Thanks, Greg. So, and this is probably with our macro. Now, one trick that you could do in case you actually, if you split it, if you come over here, so what can happen sometimes if you move it, we can move it just like that. If we wanted it to be copied, we could copy it by holding down the Alt or Option key. But if we move it vertically first, and let's say we wanted it to be in the same exact spot, but we moved it vertically first, so I have my Option key held here, and what I could do is now just hit the Command key, and now it will constrain the direction so that it doesn't move in time. So if I want to make sure that a copy is in the exact same spot, so even if I come here, let's say we split, and I accidentally move it, hold down the Command key because we moved it vertically first, and then it will go into the same exact spot. If we move an event horizontally first, and so if we move an event horizontally first, And since I moved it horizontally first, now I can't move it vertically while holding down the control or command key. So you can constrain the direction of the edits. But you could also use that macro if you wanted to speed it up as well. But that way, when you move it, it's in the same exact spot. All right, so we see Michael Teams and Brian Sawyer, who met on the live stream, got together for a visit when Brian was traveling out west. Had great dinners. It's great that people are making friendships here on the live streams. All right, so we see from Smiling Sound Productions Amsterdam, says, hi Greg, Spectral Layers 12 is great. The unmixed bass sounds much better now. In the previous version, when unmixing a song, I also got the piano and guitar track. How do I get those in the new version? So when we go to unmix a song, let me just see if we have that project still open. All right, so let's say if we come over here, all right, so it says Spectral Layers 12 is great. Unmix sounds much better now. In the previous version, while unmixing song, I got piano and guitar track. How do I get those in the new version? So there's a Spectral Layers Go, which is generally installed, which can be licensed under Cubase. But if you have the Spectral Layers Pro, so let's say if we come over here and we go to the channel inspector here. Let me activate the project, that would help. So if you just see like unmixed voice, that could be that you only have Spectral Layers Go installed, but when we come over here to the modules and we see unmix song, so make sure you're unmixing song. Here you should see, vocals, drums, bass, guitar, piano, sax and brass, and other components. So you should be able to select all those different options right there. So make sure that you're using the unmixed song and see if that comes up. If you only see like unmixed vocals and you don't see like your list isn't as long as this, just check to make sure that one, that you're running the Spectral Layers 12 and that it's so we come over here, let's go to the about screen. So here we can see running Spectral Layers 12. So see if that is what you actually have running. But you should see under unmix song all the different areas, so all the different instruments. All right. All right, so see from Quellen says, hello Greg, if someone sent me a Cubase session file with some insert plugins I don't have, but the track is freeze, do I hear the effect of the plugin that I don't own by hitting play? So if the processing is frozen in, you will hear the track with the plugins that you don't own, because what it's doing when we do that render file, when we do the freeze, it's going to come over here and it's going to render the effects on the frozen file. So that way it'll play back, and that's a good safe way of transporting projects to someone else if they don't have the same plugins that you do. So when you hit play, those plugins that were frozen into the file will play back, because what that's doing is basically just playing an audio file that's where the effects have been rendered into. So you will hear it. All right, so we see Mark Rabin just says the dog Stella is loving the weather in Montana. It's cool and rainy today, and she's sick of the sun. She's been chasing elk around and camping. She hates flies. All right, it's good to know. See Michael Teams giving kudos to Jazz Dude for great moderation in the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. And see Tim K's gotten 1 gallon of Rocky Road ice cream. And woof to Buddy from Mia. All right. Let's see. Balsa just says, thanks, Greg, for all the answers. Happy to help. All right, so Michael Teams has granted my family and I 1 gallon of limoncello ice cream. Sounds like a great flavor. All right, so we see Best Korean Jesus has been lurking, and he's been like number 32. So I think you had some questions you mentioned on Friday's live stream, so hopefully we'll get those answered for you if you still have them. Great to see you on from San Diego. Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. All right, so we see Brian Sawyer says greetings from Yuma, Arizona. Says he survived Michael Teams and the storms between him and I, and he arrived yesterday with his wife. Hope your trip went well. I'm sure that's such a stressful time, driving across country, moving, and all the logistics. So hope you can settle down and relax. All right, so we see Pastoral Apologetics says greetings from Venezia, Italia. So I assume that's Venice. It's a beautiful city. I proposed to my wife there, St. Mark's Square. Hope you're enjoying your time from Texas. All right. All right, great to see Jay from Secret Studios. His question is, hi Greg, I've tried processing some orchestral stuff through UAD plugins, but the levels are way low, and I seem to constantly have to raise gain on an orchestral instrument. Common issue. So when you're doing an orchestral instrument, so depending on the library, so let's say if I come over and depending on the articulation, so when we're trying to mimic like an orchestral instrument in a typical like keyboard, playing, how we could approach playing notes and dynamics from a keyboard, sometimes don't really make a lot of sense for orchestral instruments. It's like, the running joke is, and if we think about piano is one of the few instruments that you often can't really change the sound of a note while it's playing. You can hold a pedal down, but you can't do a crescendo. So, there's always the great joke in music school is, it's like, okay, have a piano player play this, and it just has like 2 whole notes tied together with a crescendo. So when we're trying to, with a keyboard interface, a keyboard controller, and we're trying to mimic like an orchestral instrument, so let's say, okay, I want to come over here to, let's say, my cello, and depending on the instrument, so let's say if I go to legato, You may notice that the legato can be very soft compared to like staccato. So if I come here, and I play kind of the same. So I'm playing kind of the same velocity levels, but many of these will have their dynamics. And if I move my modulation wheel here, when I'm in legato, we can see that as I move my modulation wheel, that the dynamics changes. So this way I could take one note and do a crescendo. And this is, stuff that we string players, I'm a bassist, that we do all the time, is you adjust a bow to do like a decrescendo, or you increase the pressure on a bow to adjust the dynamics. So many libraries, you may have to use the modulation wheel to control the dynamics. So no matter how hard you kind of hit the velocity, there's a good chance that many orchestral libraries won't respond to velocity depending on the particular patch that's loaded up. So the legato is going to be controlled. It's usually either from modulation, is probably the most common, because you don't need to go and kind of do vibrato on orchestral samples, or have it sound like a Leslie organ. So often the modulation wheel. So if we watch my modulation wheel here, as I move it, we can see the dynamics automatically. And that way, one note, we can change the dynamics just like we can do with a bow, or what you can do as a brass or woodwind player. So that as you can change the dynamics and do crescendo, decrescendo in the middle of the note, which is something you can't do necessarily from a keyboard instrument. So using the modulation wheel can kind of give you that while still playing kind of typical keyboard interface. So that paradigm, so MIDI obviously lends itself very well to a keyboard interface, but using the controllers. So if you have your dynamics very low, you can try to boost it through number of different plugin companies, but the problem is you probably just need to control the dynamics directly from a controller. So either modulation, CC1, a lot of libraries, if it's not CC1, will be CC11, which is MIDI continuous controller for expression. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Jay. All right, so we see Channel Ripoff, who just asks, hey, Greg, starting to get crashes. Obviously, I don't want to lose my template or my effects presets. Any suggestions to save preferences somehow and get rid of this problem and maybe import my preferences? All right, so what I would probably do is just come over here and go to your edit, and then you could go to your profile manager. Now, the profile manager will include all of your preferences, keyboard shortcuts, user presets, global workspaces, macros. A lot of the custom created elements can automatically be saved. So I would export the profile, and you could put on a USB drive. You could put it on like Google Drive or another cloud-based system. So just so you know, that could be backed up. And then if you wanted to start with brand new preferences, and you could do that by just like as you start the program, I'll do it in the window. If you hold down Alt Control Shift or Command Option Shift, something that you could do here, like as you boot up, that will take you into safe mode, and you could actually say, I want to disable the program preferences and see kind of how it behaves. And then you could also from there delete the program preferences. But you could back everything up by going to your edit menu and selecting the profile manager. So once you have that, export it. You could store it in a handy place, but go to your profile manager, and then you could export it and then import it directly back in right there. All right, so Rick France checking in from Pacific Northwest. All right, Best Korean Jesus is out of lurker mode and says, hey everyone, hope everyone's doing great. All right, Smiling Sound Productions Amsterdam just says, thanks Greg, so you're welcome. All right, so we see from Care Dixon, it says, hi Greg, I wish to work with third-party plugins instead of Cubase's EQs, compressors like SSL, UAD. What is the most effective way and any other settings to do this best, and how to render to tape? Big thanks. So if you want to use, third-party plugins, all you would have to do is, instead of, let me just exit out of Nuendo here in a second. And so using the channel strip, obviously Steinberg invented, the whole concept of VST plugins. So we like plugins, and we want you to be able to utilize plugins. That's why we made standards that are widely used by the entire industry. So when we go to, let's say, an audio track here, all you'd have to do is just come over and say, okay, I want to load up this compressor, whatever. So all of your third-party plugins will be visible here. So run the VST3 versions. So you can say, okay, I want a compressor followed by company X's compressor followed by company X's EQ, and I want to use, the tape saturation. So if we go to distortion, say, okay, I want this to all go through a magneto. So, if I want this as kind of like a channel strip, we could just come over and let's say, let's get to a limiter. And if we want to have this all within third-party tools, you could just simply come right over there. And if you say, okay, I want this on every single channel, what you could do is just come over, and if you right click, we could save an effects chain preset. So we'll say, okay, let's come over here. We'll call this July 15, 2025. And now when I go to another audio track, as we add tracks into our project, we could just kind of come right over here and say, okay, I don't have, we just add our audio track here. And we could also just say, okay, when we add audio tracks, that we could say, add track using track preset. So we'll just say, okay, I want this to be July 15. So now every time we do that, we could add a track, and all of those, or I didn't save it as a track preset rather, but if we come over here, you could just say load effects chain preset. And now all of the effects of our third-party solutions will be recalled for you. But, really check out, obviously you could use any third-party plugins, but, check out, play around a bit with the included plugins, because they're, they're very high quality and probably shouldn't be overlooked. So. All right, so we see from Smiling Sound Productions, says, thanks Greg, I had a pro version. I use an unmixed song, did not get the piano and guitar track like in the previous version, but I'll check it again. Okay. All right, Doughboy says, hey Greg, I was wondering if you could go into depth about what all the new pattern sequencer can do. I've heard it's pretty much limitless, so you could do quite a bit with it. It's very flexible. So if we come over here, you can say, okay, let's go to, I want to add, let's say, a drum track, and we can make this into a pattern event. Now we can do this with also virtual instruments. I will load up just a quick preset here. All right, so let's say this is my sound source. Now I go to the editor. I could see all of the sounds automatically carry directly over from our drums. And we could set, okay, like how many steps do we want? So we have 16th notes, and I could say, let's make it, 16 steps. I could also, if I wanted to do like 2 bars of a pattern, we could make it 32 steps. All right. So when we want to start building stuff up, we'll just come here. I'll just solo this. So I'm just going to hit play. And this is its own kind of internal sequencer. So I could come over and say, okay, let's do. All right, so we could just kind of drop in. So say we want to do 4 on the floor. All right, so if I just kind of select the lane, we could bring. Now we could also do some clever things, like if I don't want to have to kind of paint in, I could say, okay, let's go to my open hi-hat. And I could say, okay, let's make it every 4th or every 2nd or every 3rd. Now there's also where we could have Euclidean rhythms. So if I want to come over here, I could just kind of bring this dial, and this will kind of increase in kind of a musical manner kind of the density of the notes. And let's say I want to come over here and adjust the velocity. Now also we could come over and just say, okay, I want to put in, let's say, like a bongo sound. So, but let's say I want this bongo to be in like 8th note triplets. So I want to come here and we want to kind of create different rhythmic values. So now we can see I have a different grid for the bongos there. So I bet, and we could also have different steps. So if we want to have like more steps or less steps. Now let's say I want to come over, and as we're working with this, let's say if I don't like this, I could just get rid of it. And let's say I want to put in like 30-second notes in the hi-hat somewhere. I could just right click here, and then we could double the step resolution. So now it's still playing back 16th notes, but I could just kind of put in and again I could just come over here. So let's say I have these congas, and I may not want these to always kind of play. So what I could do is come over here and say, okay, when I click on a particular note, we have play probability. So I can say, okay, 49% of the time, play this note. 84% of the time, play that note. So let's look at our play probability for this. So So I always want that to play, but sometimes I just want to come over here and adjust. Now say, okay, I want to maybe change this to my closed hi-hat, and let's come over here. Let's make this double the resolution. So now we could so even if I want to try out like different Euclidean rhythms here, and just kind of add my own. So now let's say I want to have the congas play different directions. So I could come right over here and just say, okay, we want to just kind of switch the directions of the congas. So we can say, okay, let's have this going backwards, and I want this one to alternate forward and backwards. So we could have different patterns that are playing forward and other ones that are playing backwards simultaneously. I could also just say, okay, I want to go to this bongo here, and let's just have it randomly throw some notes in. So you could come over here and just kind of click on the dice, and if you wanted to, and we could say, okay, there's different random functions for kick, snare, hi-hat. Let's say, okay, I want this to be for closed hi-hat and randomize. Let's adjust the velocity. Now, if I like this particular pattern, we could also just copy it. And now we are on pattern 2. I could just have different variations. So let's say now, and let's just bring the velocity down on the clavs. Now, if I wanted to do just an entirely brand new pattern, we could also just have it completely randomized as well. And we could adjust kind of the amount of steps. So if we just want to come right over here. So now what we could do is if I wanted this in the pattern, I could also just drag this particular pattern to my project. And now we could just have that pattern automatically just play on our timeline, and we could say, okay, at this point, I want to, make a cut in the pattern. I want to go to pattern 2, and I want this to switch to pattern 3, and then back to pattern 1. So we could just kind of come right over here and then have these patterns triggered directly on our project window. So as we play, it'll start playing right here. In time, when we get to here, it's going to switch to pattern 2. So we hear the clav, and let's go to pattern 3, followed by pattern 1. And then you could also just kind of add swing onto different elements. So if you want the whole pattern to swing or different instruments to swing. So all sorts of great stuff that you could do if you want to do timing, offsets. And if we want to convert this into MIDI directly from the patterns on the project window, just kind of click right there. And now it's all broken down as MIDI. So the pattern editor is very powerful. It's a great addition. You could also come over here, do offsets, velocity variations. You could gate, and incorporate other things. So, if you wanted to come here and just randomize that particular parameter for velocity, we could just come over, and if no events are on the project window, so very kind of easy. Come come over here and make beats and patterns with the pattern editor in Cubase 14. So lots of fun. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Doughboy. And hopefully someone got some good guitar playing in with the pattern. All right, so we see Sable Winters from Bay Area, California is like number 63. All right, Tony Trunzo asks, Greg, is it possible to use the MIDI keyboard to trigger the chord pads and use the retrospective record? All right, let's find out. Okay. All right, so we have that. Let's go to chord pads. All right. So yep, looks like it. So if I come here, I'll just trigger the chord pads. Then we'll hit the retrospective record, and then so let's see if it's triggers the chords or just the individual notes. All right, let me turn off the auto quantize here. So it might be just the actual note that's being triggered because so it will record the trigger note. So just like we record like, so if I come here, we'll see that this note will be, let's say, a C. All right, and so it doesn't look like the chords are actually triggered, but the individual trigger notes are going to be captured. So all right, wonderful to see Gerald Ely on from Martinez, California. All right, we see George checking in from Germany. All right, Chatfield jumped a little bit. All right, Anthony Clark is saying hey to everyone. All right, so we see Altine Lee says, hi, Greg. It was so handy to have printed out manuals of Cubase and Wavelab in book form in the old times. Anything similar available of current versions? Is there a Nuendo 14 manual available in PDF format? So if you just go to, let's come over here. I think you go to Steinberg.help. All right, so we can say, okay, I want to search for Nuendo 14. And we'll say Nuendo 14 operation manual. All right, now there's, so if you click here, like on the PDF, let's go ahead and download. All right, so you come right over here, and this will be like your traditional PDF manual. kind of how the previous printed documentation was. So there's kind of a web help and a PDF version. So I always kind of, what I use is the PDF version, which will often include more illustrations and pictures. And you could take this to a print shop if you want paper, but you can just simply come right over here and print it out as well. So, but it's going to be thousands of pages. So here, just in this, excluding the scoring and the plugins and some other things, just the Nuendo 14 manual is 1,800 pages. So, and now obviously in a day when we're doing kind of more digital distribution, where people aren't getting boxes and shipping boxes of paper around the world when people could search easily. But there are, if you just go to the Steinberg.help and then just click on the PDF. So then you could just come over here and, see in the PDF version, you could just, have access to all of the documentations in PDF for Cubase, Nuendo, or any of the instruments plugins. And I personally, I'm a big fan of Kindle for reading, so I have the manuals on a Kindle as well that I could access. So if I'm bored at night, I could refresh myself on different Cubase and Nuendo functions. All right, so we have a little Suspense Beats says, hi, hello, I'm new to Cubase. I'm trying to free trial. So welcome to the Steinberg family. We hope that you purchase a license for Cubase, and we're here to help you out. So any questions that you have, little Suspense Beats, feel free to ask, and we'll hopefully help get you up to speed faster. So, and welcome to the community. All right, great to see Tiago sending greetings from Brazil. All right. See, Michael Teams says he prints the manual. He puts the manual on a flash drives and takes it to a print shop. It could be expensive, usually $80 to $100 US. So, yeah. All right, so we see from Kara Dixon, it says, thank you, Greg. I love Cubase plugins. Yeah. All right, we see the Jazz Dude's also given a link for the manual. Yeah, so 1,800 pages, so it's a lot of paper. But I understand the convenience of kind of sitting outside reading the manual, refreshing stuff. All right. So we see from Anthony Clark says, hi, Greg. Question: when having MIDI chord notes in MIDI, how to pitch bend one note from each chord, for example, and how to make the bend fast or slow, depending on automation, and how to replicate it in Cubase. All right. So Steinberg was the first company that actually did this, and then MIDI 2.0 kind of went along with what Steinberg was doing. So let's say we have and this requires like a VST 3.5 instrument. So the instruments that you have here inside of Cubase are all good. So let's just do like a Hallian Sonic, and let's find like nice FM. It's kind of a synth. Alright, so let me just... Okay, so generally MIDI itself doesn't do this. As part of MIDI... Alright, so let's say I'm just going to drop a chord in here. Okay. All right, so I'll just extend the length of these notes out here. All right, so let's say we have a chord here. All right, so if we wanted to do pitch bend, what we're going to do is there's a little preference that's helpful, and if you actually just kind of click here, and it's going to be under, let's see what it's called. Just all right, so this icon here. So when we double click on the note, we could have the note deleted, or we could go into when this is highlighted here. Double click opens the note expression editor. Let me just see if it's something that's it could be hidden or not. Doesn't look like this. It looks like it's part. So now what we could do is we go to note expression, and you need an instrument that does this. So you can't do it with an external MIDI instrument unless it's MIDI 2.0. But if we wanted to come over here and do independent pitch bends on individual notes, so generally, for the most part, in the MIDI 1.0, which is still the standard, MIDI 2.0 has been out for a while. Most instruments, most hardware controllers don't support it, so it's kind of a shame. But Steinberg came out with this in Cubase 6.5, I believe. So when we want to come over here, we'll go to our note expression. So I'm going to select tuning. So with this enabled, I could just say, okay, I want to take this note, and I want to just draw in pitch bend. And let's say I want to double click on this note, and I want the pitch bend here to start at the center. And let's say this note, I want the volume. So now when I double click, I want the volume to get softer, louder, just on that one note. So when we look at this, we could say, okay, show our note expression editing. So we could just enable our note expression here. So we look at it now, we could do pitch bend on So once you're here, once you have this open, we could double click on the notes. In the note expression tab in the MIDI editor, choose what parameter you want. So if you want it to be breath control, modulation. So if we come here and we want modulation, we could, have any different, so, if we wanted pitch bend, instead I could come here and just now say, okay, let's just draw in pitch bend. So whatever parameter you want, you could select and then be able to edit it on a note-by-note basis. So it's another area where Steinberg really kind of made MIDI more expressive, so that if you're playing a chord, one note in the chord could change volumes without having to split it, put it on a different channel, because in the MIDI 1.0 generation, controllers, pitch bend were all channel-based as opposed to note-based. So you could do it kind of in Cubase for many years now. So let me know if that makes sense for you, Anthony. All right. All right, so we see George is saying hi. Hope everyone's doing great. We have Rolf Shield, sending greetings from Germany. Thanks for joining us today, being part. All right, so we see from George says, when comping tracks in a folder, group editing active, is there a way to which all tracks in a folder all follow the comping decisions? All right, yes, I think we showed this last week, but we'll do it again here. Okay. So let's add, let's say 4 audio tracks here. And I'm going to put these into folder. And we'll do group editing. All right, so let's say we'll do a quick record. We'll do a couple passes here. Okay, so let's say we have 4 tracks, we have 3 different takes, and we want to comp between them. So I think the trick to this is to open up all of the lanes. All right, so let's say we have group editing on, and now when I come over here and we do, let's say, a comp. So let's say we have a comp like this, we open up the other lanes, we can see, well, looks like they are, all right, so maybe not all of them. So, all right, so I'm going to undo that comp. Then I'm going to open up all of the lanes. And this may seem silly, but once you do it once. So, and now when I do a comp across, that comp is automatically applied to all of the lanes when they're open. So I do a comp on one, then that comp is applied. But I think you need to physically open up the different lanes, and then the comping would be applied to all of the different takes as we work on it here. So we can see that all those comps are automatically synchronized. So once again, just make sure that each of the tracks in the comp, that the lanes are open. You don't have to look at them, but then when you make the edits on one, they could be applied to all the other tracks. So let me know if that's helpful for you, George. All right. And see just further information. It says I have DI and amp signal of same performance and want to comp. Yeah, so just open both of them. All right, so we see Kara Dixon from Vancouver, British Columbia, says, hey, Greg, having issues with low velocity when connecting V drums into Groove Agent 5, keeping decent dynamics as best possible. Thanks as always. All right, so now there's probably, like most MIDI controllers, will have some sense of dynamics, like some control. So most of them will be linear, some may be, set up, and often you get kind of almost a line similar to like a compressor. Often you'd have like a velocity sensitivity if it was, and this is often on the controller itself. So if we come over here, we can say, and I'll show it just visually, like on the Grand, we could show it as well. So often on your MIDI controller, when we come over here, we could have different types of controls. And make sure that your drum controller isn't set to something like this, where the velocity is going to be, at a starting point, you want it to be linear so that your velocities can, be straight as you play them from the drum controller. You could audition the velocities in an instrument like Groove Agent, since you're playing Groove Agent. So let's come over here. All right, so when we go to, let's say, the instrument here, you could trigger lower velocities with clicking lower on the pad with the mouse. So you could see if the instrument has like velocity layers, that it's going to kind of respond directly to that. So a lot of times when this happens is the incoming MIDI isn't as kind of dynamic as you would expect, for the velocities don't vary. You can also, if you go to the MIDI inserts, come right over here to the MIDI monitor. And at that point, when you hit the key on your keyboard, you could see if the velocities are kind of tracking. So you see value 2 here. See if the incoming velocity is triggering as you would expect. If this is triggering, then make sure that if the velocities are coming in as expected, then make sure that your actual drum instrument is set to respond to velocity. So if you only have one sample, it won't change as much. So you can still have like velocity contours. Let's say if I come over to this, which is like a beat agent kit, so you could it will get louder. And there's probably also in the Groove Agent kit, let's go to maybe the so if we go to pitch, let's just see if there's maybe in the amplifier section, if there's a velocity curve, maybe. So if, make sure that you're in velocity mode here, and that will automatically split that. Now, if your controller is not transmitting the velocities that you anticipate, and like it's only outputting a limited range, so it should go from like 0 to like 127. If that is not transmitting, what you could do is come over to the routing tab, and like we showed the input transformer before, so what we could do is we go to the routing, let's go to the track and open panel, and we can say we want to transform. We will choose, and what we want to do is say, we could actually just come over here and say velocity, and then we'll insert, and what we want to do to the velocity, if we're only getting, let's say, velocity 0 through 32, we could say that we want to, we'll say our velocity, we'll say our, okay, so let's say our velocity, we want to, we could come over here and choose to, we're going to take our velocity, and what we want to do to the velocity is take the main value and multiply by 4. So now every time that if I hit a velocity of 1, it would be 4. So if you have a limited velocity range, so it's 1 through 32, you may want to say multiply every velocity by 4. Or if you're getting a velocity range from the MIDI drums of 1 through 64, maybe multiply by 2. And then as you play in, this will kind of take the velocity and expand it to its more natural dynamic range. So again, you just say you want to take your velocity and main value, multiply by, if it's sending way too much velocity, you could divide by. So, and then you could try different factors here. So give that a try. Let me know like what you find out, if your MIDI drums are actually transmitting the expected velocity. But Groove Agent has accommodations to work with multiple velocities. Sometimes MIDI drums will be set to a fixed velocity value, and you may just have to raise that. So. All right, so Gerald Ely. Okay, I'll get to that question in just a second. Let me think. All right. Okay, just make sure I'm not leaving out questions. Sorry. All right, so we see Ngura Maxon just saying hello from Kenya. Thanks for joining us, being part of the community. Luis Palomino asks, hi Greg, how can I control my VST instruments with my MIDI controller, Korg microcontrol knobs and faders? Thanks for the answer. Cheers from Peru. All right, we have a Luis from Peru that works on Steinberg. All right, so let's come over. I'm just going to add a virtual instrument here. All right. So let's come over here. Let's say we want to do retro log. Okay, so we'll come over and so let's add an instrument track. We'll do retro log here. All right, now when we go to the MIDI remote, generally the Korg stuff will automatically show up right here. And we'll have different quick controls. So if you have a Korg Nano control, the default setting here is for focus quick controls. So my knobs on my controller are going to be mapped to the first 8 parameters of my synthesizer. So I move knob 1, you'll see the cutoff. I move knob 2, it's going to control the resonance. Knob 3 is going to be distortion. Knob 4 is going to be the envelope. So knob 5 is attack. So these are going to be kind of the key parameters. So anytime that I go to this instrument, these focus quick controls, and we could set these up. You could just double click to go to the mapping assistant, and we go to focus quick control. So we'll see quick control 1 through 8. So those are automatically set up to the first 8 relevant parameters. Now, if these are relevant parameters for you, or for someone else, but not for you, if you wanted to change the parameters, at top of each of the plugins, we'll see a little QC. And then at this point, we could see what the 8 parameters are for this particular plugin. So at this point, I could actually click on learn, and I say, okay, I want to go to assign this parameter. I could move that parameter and assign this parameter to quick control 1. So now that I have my assignments done, when I open up, it's automatically controlling the parameters, again, by moving my focus quick control knobs here. So I could just have all sorts of fun there. If I go to a different instrument, so let's say if I go to Groove Agent, I open it up, I could control the 8 parameters that are the focus quick controls in Groove Agent. So if I want to control the volume, the pan, mute, my aux 1, and we could change those. So as soon as it's a focus quick control, notice that I have my retro log open here, and I'll just add a pad shop because it'll be more graphically distinctive. All right, so I open up Pad Shop, and by default, you'll have these 8 quick controls. So Pad Shop is my active plugin. So now I'm controlling parameters in Pad Shop. I make retro log by clicking on it, the active plugin. It's now controlling parameters inside of RetroLog. Switch over to Pad Shop, click here to make it active, and now we're controlling parameters inside. So this way, the focus quick controls do the 8 quick controls for the focused window, whether it's a plugin, an instrument, or your mix console or track. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right. Okay, reading through comments. All right, wonderful to see Graham Witcher checking in from Oxford. All right, Gerald Ely just mentioned, says, hey Greg, I get full chords when I used a retrospective recording with the chord pads, but I used a click in the left zone inspector. The button on the transport won't give you the full chord. All right, so let's give it a shot. So let's say if I come here, just switch instruments here quickly. Okay, so let's come over here to the chord pads. Okay, so let's come over here to RetroLog and say, if we do the insert as a linear chord, so yeah, it looks like that works. Thanks for the tip. I'll make sure to mention that to the Steinberg team to see if that, so thank you, Gerald, for that tip. I'll bring that to their attention. See, Sable Winters says, that's cool. Yeah, now I don't know what was cool, so, but I'm grateful that Sable thought it was cool. Okay, so Anthony Clark says that's one. One more question about it. Is it possible to draw the expressions in automation to control the shapes of notes expressions? So it's not, I don't think it's going to show up as automation. So let's say if we're here and I don't think that we could see it's going to show up on the event, because if we're showing it as automation, it's hard to know exactly if, you know, if we just saw like a continuous controller here. So let's say, okay, if I have this like modulation, I'm looking at this in a particular lane, you know, since it's on not globally, but it's for the particular note, I think it makes more sense for it to be kind of on top of the note. So this, we don't know what note it's on top of here as we work with this. So it kind of, you know, for it to make sense and to edit, you know, it kind of needs to be on the note, because, you know, every note in a chord could have different values, and how you represent that, especially one note is held down and you do something and you're holding down different notes at different lengths, then it could be just impossible to really get a sense of what notes are being affected by the note expression controls. All right. All right, so we see George saying, this is great. I tried it, but didn't have lanes open on all tracks. Stupid me. So I would assume that the, so yeah, don't feel bad about it. Just know that you can do it. So, but I would assume, it took me a while to figure it out too, so don't feel bad. But know that you could do it when you need to. All right, so we see Kara Dixon says, thank you, Greg. Perfect. Regarding the V drum velocity, you're always helpful. A long time since Club Cubase Vancouver. That was a great, I loved, was it Long and McQuaid in Vancouver? And then I did a clinic at a recording school in Vancouver once, but I thought the Long and McQuaid store in Vancouver was just really fabulous. I would love to go back and be able to do more clinics in Canada. So. But glad you could make it on the live stream. All right, artist known as Lubs, give me a big thumbs up. Okay. All right, so we see it's cooling down in Oxford after a heat wave. All right, so we see Gerald Ely says, Greg, everything you do is cool. So thanks. Just an Oompa Loompa in a world of Willy Wonkas. All right, so we see Bratman Studios. Maybe a comment to Mark Rabin says, doing any drumming lately. And he says, my Roland kit is sounding great lately. I'm using a MIDI 5-pin DIN to USB cable into Cubase. It makes audio interference sounds, but not in Cubase. Don't know why. So yeah, sometimes it could be, like when I moved into my house, my last house, and kind of was rewiring my studio, I just made sure that I tried to separate power cables from audio cables from data cables so that they weren't kind of resting on top of each other. But sometimes you just get a weird RF interference. So, but if you have it on top of other cables, try elevating it up a little bit and, see if you put on like a little hook or run it elsewhere if that makes a difference. So. Okay, just reading through comments. All right. Okay, so we see from Tony Trunzo, it says, Greg, about the retrospective recording question, I found out if you go to the transport tab and go to retrospective and choose insert input from selected track as linear recording, the chords will show. So yeah, and it looks like so if I come over here, let's just do that again. So we'll start at measure 9 and go to the chord pads. Okay. All right, let me just make sure. Yeah, that seems to work as expected, but let me just try from here. Yeah, so I'm not sure why linear recording would make a difference, but I guess we know 2 ways to do it. So sorry about that, but I'll bring it to their attention and see if I can get that figured out more. right, so we see that there's a hose pipe ban in with water companies can mean a £1,000 fine in England. So this seems excessive, right? All right. Okay, let me go to a question that was mailed in. All right, so we had a question, how to lower 2 automation points to create fades going to the next and previous automation node. Okay, so let's say if we open up, let's say our audio track will go to our automation. And let's say we have an automation node here and here, and we want to take these automation modes and bring them down. All right, so a lot of times what you could do is between 2 nodes, bring it down. Now, if we don't want like kind of a straight drop, what we could do is just come over here. So I'm going to select these 2 modes. I think I have 2. All right. Now the trick is when we do this, we don't want to necessarily drop it from here because that will do just like a straight drop. But if we select these 2 middle nodes right here and we kind of hover over, so we want to switch to the selection tool, make sure that we had the selection tool, select the 2 nodes, and as you hover over, you'll see it turn to a hand. And now we could just drop it without affecting, so we could have it kind of ramp down to this point and then ramp back up to the next point. So to do that, don't just kind of drop it straight down. Come over here and select the 2 nodes. And then when one you see it turn to a hand, we could do that. And if we hold down Control, I can't accidentally move it in time. So if I just come again here, select those 2 nodes, hold down Control or Command, and now I can't, you could restrict the movement of the automation. All right. All right, so Graham Witcher says, interesting how we always discuss the weather in the live stream. Anyway, let's not detract from the real interest here of this wonderful DAW. So I think it's always interesting to, it helps me. I try to visualize what everyone's, what they look like, where they're at. And it's, sometimes having a sense of what the weather is like for me is always interesting. So I don't mind at all. But we're glad everyone likes the DAW. All right, we see Tony Tronzo just says, thanks, Greg, for your help. All right, next question that was mailed in. All right, how to automate plugin parameters in the pattern editor. Okay, so we saw earlier kind of the pattern editor. So let's say if we want to jump to we'll come over here. Let's automate parameters as well. So we'll show how to do that. Okay, we'll come over here. So let's say we have this, and we go to our drum track. And this doesn't have to be just the drum track. It could be anything we want. So let's say, okay, we have this pattern playing in a drum track, and let's say I want to take off the repeat. That was kind of cool sounding. All right, so let's say we're just kind of playing along, and maybe I want to take the kick and I want to adjust the decay. Okay, so what I could do now is, and we have the pattern editor, so we'll come over here and we could see that we have these different parameters at the bottom of that we can kind of do automation with. So I'm going to come to the drum machine here, and let's just go to the decay, right click, and we're going to say pattern editor assigned to step modulation, step automation. Okay, now that I've done that, we can come over to the editor and we'll see that we have our amplifier decay. So I'm going to click there. So let's say I want a lot of amplifier decay on the first note and just a little bit on the second note. So as we play the pattern now, and then we could kind of just tweak this. And notice that that isn't affecting the snare or hi-hats. So if we want to go back and add other elements, so we could come over here, let's go back to our drum machine. So let's say we want to go to the snare and we just want to maybe randomize the pitch. So let's say as we're playing, so let's go to, so let's say let's get to the noise. So I could come over here. Let's assign this to an automation track. Come over, let's select our snare. All right, let's just. All right, so in the pattern editor, sorry, opened up the wrong thing. So now we go back to our pattern editor. And now we can say, okay, I want more noise. And if we wanted to put in like some other, and let's adjust the velocity here. So all sorts of fun that you could do. So we go to the kick. Again, we could just say, let's go to the amp decay. And as we select, and we want to make that extend. Let's make this less. So it sounds like we're using 3 different kick drums, but it's 1 different snare drum. So again, just go to any of the parameters, and I think this could also go if we had, let's say, a reverb. So if we wanted to come over here, let's go onto this track, let's add a reverb, and say, okay, well, let's go to Roomworks. Okay, and we want to adjust our, so we'll come over here, let's adjust our mix. So I guess it's going to be for the instrument only. But within the instrument, just come over here and just right click and then assign that into step automation lane. So you can have all sorts of great creativity with that. All right, let me go back to our live questions. All right, so we see Bohan Polavina just says how to separate keyboard Novation MK49 on the left side Hallian, right side Pad Shop. So we did that a little earlier. So, but let me know if you can't find it. Let me see if I have the project. It's still open. But it's using the input transformer. Yeah, so, but quickly, if you want to come over here, let's add different instrument tracks. Show to you quickly again, but we did it earlier. So let's say we want Pad Shop, and we want a Hallian Sonic. Okay, so go to the routing. You'll see this little icon here. You want to say track. Let's come here to open panel. We're going to activate this. We're going to filter. And let's say for what we want to hear, our Hallian Sonic, we're going to say filter pitches. We're going to filter notes where the subtype, which is the pitch, is less than C3. Or we're going to say more than C3. So we want the Hallian Sonic on, so we'll say bigger than C3. All right, so this will filter notes out below C3, and on this track, we're going to do the same principle. You want to go to the input transformer to track the panel, and we want to filter notes where their subtype, which is an MIDI note message pitch, is less than. So we want to filter notes bigger. So we have this as, yeah, so we want to do notes that are less than C3. So make sure that this is checked, and now Pad Shop will play C3 and higher, and Hallian Sonic will play instruments C3 and lower. Okay. All right, so we see from Uno Momento that the Estonian sun is already setting early. And it looks like Uno Momento is going on a cruise. Have a wonderful vacation. All right, Captain Cricket 3D says, hey Greg, can you explain why there's a channel tab and inspector tab on the left side of your screen? Isn't the inspector tab redundant? Both tabs have similar functions. So why there's kind of the, why, and this came in 13, why there's like two different inspector tabs that were opened. Let's say we have a VST instrument, so sometimes this will always have the audio characteristics of whatever channel is selected. So it used to be that we had kind of, there is some duplication, but like if I'm here, we could think of this as strictly audio. So I'm not going to see, and this is mimicking exactly what we would see in the large full-scale mixer here. So let's say if we zoom in, we're going to have all of our hardware options, routing, pre-section. So everything that's audio is always going to be here. So that's a good thing to have. Now, once we come here, sometimes navigating and, what people were having to do is, let's say if we come over here having the ability to navigate between, 16 or 15 different inspector tabs that were open could be daunting. And if you're doing strictly audio, you could just use this one inspector. If you are doing MIDI with MIDI inserts, MIDI plugins, we may want to just have like the MIDI aspects and the MIDI continuous controllers to be, and track aspects to be here, like track versions. But we could think of this as going to be, again, solely dedicated to the audio characteristics so that they're more accessible without having to, and we could put up, okay, here I want to see my MIDI channel settings. I want to see my MIDI routing. I want to see my MIDI modifiers and my MIDI inserts. And here I want to see my audio inserts, my EQ, my channel sends, and I also want to see my channel latency. So while they can be redundant, they could also show you a tremendous amount of information, and think of this as being strictly the audio characteristics. And if you're doing a lot of virtual instruments, this could solely be the inspector for dealing with, all of the MIDI parameters. Now, also, once we get into editors, you may want to go to the editor mixer, but still have the audio characteristics still available to access, even though now we're not looking at the MIDI parameters, we're looking at the editor parameters and visibility. So once I change this, my audio is still always present. If you don't like it, you could turn it off. If you're doing all audio and you don't need the MIDI stuff, you could just simply have the audio. So it gives you more flexibility so that you have, access to more information in less space without having to constantly open and close different inspector tabs. So let me know if that makes sense, Captain Cricket 3D. All right, so we see Mark Rabin says, trying not to distract. What is the best test tone method in Cubase? Best test tone, sine, sweeping from 19 to 21K. Trying to set a crossover, if that makes any sense. Okay, so I think if we come up, before I do my test tone, I'll take the volume down so we're not killed. All right, so let's say if we want to do, so we'll go to Tools, to Test Generator. All right, so if we want to do a sweep, you could just kind of click here, and let me see if we could set. So if we do this, and let's go to the sweep here, and we could choose the frequencies. So if you want to do 19 through 21K, we could say 19,000 through 21,000. And this probably won't translate to YouTube, but if we turn this on, this way we could do a continuous sweep and start. So if you wanted to, have particular frequencies, you could also just do it on the left or right channel or both channels. So if you want to sweep between two different frequencies, you could click right here on sweep, and then you could set the particular frequency. So let's say if you want to do 19 hertz to 20, to say 21,000. Looks like it may cap out at 20K, but so you could just simply set your frequencies there. And if you want this to be a longer duration, so say you want it to be you could set the duration there. So pretty cool tool for being able to calibrate different aspects. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Mark. All right, so we see Jay from Secret Studios is back. All right, so we see Vince is Fly V and Winnipeg is off to his parents' house. Take care until next time. So we'll see you on Friday. All right, so we see Mark Rabin just says, thanks, Greg. Yes, very helpful. So, yeah, hopefully you get your crossovers set. He says, I remembered it, but could not remember how to get it. So, that's fine. All right, let's go. I think we had another question that was mailed in. Okay, so we see it just says, hi there, Greg and Steinberg. I've recorded a lot of projects with MIDI and audio at 96K over the last few years. My problem is I can no longer be bothered with all the problems of cutting the channel count into half of my hardware, ADAT/MADI stuff, and I can't achieve a decent track count in Cubase running my M1 Max Studio Max without it maxing out. My question is, how do I take all those old 96 kilohertz Cubase projects and run them at 48K without having to go through in-depth line-by-line converting audio and changing where the converted audio is in relation to the old MIDI parts? They don't match up, and then the projects are very complex with different time signatures and tempos in one song. Is it wise to record at 96K and then have the original audio files at 96K copied and changed to 48K files? What's the best way to do this? Many thanks in advance and appreciation for all the great work Steinberg and Greg Undo does. It's really incredibly helpful. All right, so let's say we have a project and we want to convert to sample rate. So there's a lot of really arduous methods of doing this. I'll show you kind of an easy method. So let's come over here. Okay, so we'll listen to this project, and I think the files in this project are at 44.1, so we're 16-bit 44.1, so listen to it. We'll just get the pitch. All right, so we have a sense of the pitch. So we want to change this from 44.1, let's say, to 48, or 96 to 48. It will be the same principle. So we're going to go to the project menu to project setup. And you could also just hit Shift plus the letter S to open that up, Shift S. So right now we see our project's at 44.1. I'm going to change my sample rate here, let's say, to 48K to 96K, whatever. So I'm going to say 48K. And then I'm going to hit OK. So now we get a message. You want to convert audio files to the new rate. Sure. Do you want to keep the source files in the pool directory? So we're going to keep the original 44.1 and 48K unless we're running out of hard disk space. Can't hurt. So we're going to keep those. Now you may get a message if you have files that are in musical mode that you want to render the musical mode files to the current tempo. With that, choose yes. Now it says, do you want to keep the audio events at their sample positions? So since we're changing the sample rate, we're going to say no, because I want those to maintain their positions within context of the project, not at their sample positions. So this last one, select no. So now when we play back, we can see that our project is 48K. We'll listen to it and see, make sure we had the same tonality. So same pitch, same key. Now our project, whether it had MIDI or audio, is all running at the new sample rate without any huge fuss or muss about it. So again, go to your project window to project setup, or Shift plus the letter S, change the sample rate, and then you could say yes to everything except for keep the content at the current sample rate position. That, choose no, and then your project will now be at the sample rate that you chose. All right, let's go back to questions. Thanks for all the great questions from everyone. All right. All right, just let me... Okay. All right, so we see from Secret Studios, says Cubase, I've been considering Mac aggregate device creation for certain tasks, tracking and mixing. How does Cubase handle aggregate devices? Anything I should be concerned about? I would say it's not ideal. I think even Apple doesn't recommend it. And the problem with aggregate devices, and it seems like great, like, oh, I have like 2 or 3 audio interfaces. I'll connect them all together and I'll get all the inputs and outputs that I need. But the problem is that many of the times, unless the audio interfaces have a one common clock, that the interfaces will kind of, all the interfaces will not be synchronized together. And when we're dealing with audio, synchronizing the clock between different audio interfaces and different sources is really critical, because we're often working at 48,000 samples divisions per second, or 96,000 divisions per second. So if you record something on one interface and you're playing back audio that's on a different interface that's not resolving to the same clock, those interfaces could all be basically drifting. So it's like putting 3 canoes in a river and thinking that they're all going to end up at the same time at the same place. If you just put 3 empty canoes in, current's going to take one a little bit faster. You may hit a rock with this canoe. So all these different things, they're probably the 3 canoes that you put into a river, or you go down the river a mile, will end up coming in at different times. That's kind of what your audio clock is doing. So if you're recording on a clock that's out of sync with in an interface where the clock is out of sync with the playback, you're just constantly off. Now, there are provisions if your audio interfaces are all clocked and resolved to a similar audio clock, then it could work. That's not the vast majority of time. So probably, I would use aggregate devices in a pinch, but I wouldn't do any kind of mission critical work with it. And, even Apple will, I believe they don't even recommend aggregate devices anymore, or really support it. It was something that was implemented in OS X in 2001, I believe, or 2000. I believe it was 2000. It really hasn't been changed or modified since then. All right. Okay, so you see Mark Raven says, thanks, Greg. It was very helpful. I remembered it, but could not remember how to get it. It says, and then it says, basically, I'm trying to take 2 bass tracks, and one I want bass below 179 hertz and the other above 179 hertz, I think, using the high-low cuts and pre. Is this a reasonable frequency to cross over? So if you're kind of doing like 2 tracks and, so to me, if we have like a bass track, so let's say we have bass tracks here, and we're listening to it, and we're looking at our EQ, and let's go to our pre section. So, and we say, okay, I want to, do let's say 48 dB cut here. So if we're working with that, I would again figure out the key of the song. So let's say we're in the key of G. I don't have perfect pitch, but let's say we're in the key of G. I'm going to type in G0, and that's where I'm going to set the crossover point. I would start at maybe the key of the song and see if that makes sense. So that the crossover corresponds to the frequencies that are being used in the song. I think many people just take EQ frequencies for granted and don't take into account the relationship of the frequencies to the content that's playing through. So if you just figure out the key of the song, go into the frequency here. So let's say, it's in a key of B. So say B0. And I could type that in, and then I would maybe start with that point and see if that makes sense to what you want to do. But I would maybe start at the particular frequencies that make sense for the musical context. So if you know what the key is, try that as a default, and you could do this in any of the EQ frequencies. Say, I want to go to B2, and that will tell you what the frequency is there. So as we're coming over here, we can say, okay, I want to come over here. We're in the key of B, so I want this to be B4, and it will take you directly to that frequency when you type the MIDI note in. So try that first and see if that makes sense musically within your context. But again, I always think of EQ as being related to the key of the song, because those are the frequencies which are prevalent in the particular track. All right. Okay, so we have a question from Cal. Says, hi Cubasers, is there a preference to set for saving presets? For instance, in the drum machine, if I edit a pad or change the name of the pad and try to save the edited name, it says it stays highlighted. All right, so let's come over. Let's just do a new project here. Okay. I'll just generate some audio files here. Okay. Okay, so let's say these are my samples. Let's add a drum machine track. Add a drum track. Okay. So let's say I want my kick. Let me just snare. Now let's say hat. Okay, so we have our samples here. All right, now let's say I want to save this as a preset. Okay, now let's say I want to change. Let's see if we change the name here. Let me clear my throat. All right. All right, so it says, for instance, drum machine, if I edit a pad or change the name on a pad or try to save the edited name, it just stays highlighted. So I think let's rename pad. All right, so let's say okay, so I just right clicked. So I'm going to just add 7/15 for the date. So we'll say rename pad. So just clicking on it. right, and I will save this as a preset. Let's come over here and so just say label this new preset as date added. Okay, so I'm going to add a new drum track. Or we could just come over to media to user presets, track presets drum. All right, so we see my July 15th. I'm going to drag this over. We see our kick, snare, hat. Now let's do it with the date added. And now you can see that the names were updated to kick 715, snare 715, hi-hat 715 as we labeled them. So when all right, just make sure. So if I edit a pad or change the name of the pad and try to save the edited name, it just stays highlighted. So I just, again, came right over here and just chose to rename the pad. And let's call it cow. And then enter. And then that name for the pad was automatically taken. So let me know if I'm doing anything differently than you are with that, or taking a different approach, or if I'm misunderstanding. All right, we see Netic Music says, hi everyone, wondering if there's a way to get the correct enharmonic spelling for minor keys. C minor still shows A sharp major, which is wrong. It should show E flat major. So let me know, like, if you're where you're editing the keys, if it's on a chord track. So let's say, let me see if it's on a chord track. Maybe if we come here, let's say we want to put in okay, so let's say we are in C, so we have our C Aeolian, so let's come over here and say, so, but let me know, this from Netic Music, so wondering how to get the correct enharmonic spelling for minor keys. So let me know exactly where you're doing it. So, here we could set, if we set our root note, we could change the root note, but that doesn't change the scale between relative minor, the major and the relative minor, or in what window you're running into. And I'll see if I could recreate it for you. All right, so you see Bratman Studio says, hi Greg, I think you skipped over my question about swing just above Mark Rabin's 3 comments. Sorry about that. Let me see. Rick, if you just want to ask questions, I see that I see a comment from you, says to Graham Witcher, says weather like music in global, but we're still glued to Greg's dulcet tones. Let me see. So I don't see the question in the chat. Sorry if I missed it. I see 3 areas where Mark has 3 questions. I see Graham, the Captain Cricket 3D question, and then I see Flyvy and Secret Studios above, another 3 instances. So if you want to just ask the question again, Rick, be happy to get to it. Sorry. All right, so we see a question from Roland Stuff. It says, "Hi Greg, I've moved all VSTs to a D drive on my PC to save C drive space. Very occasionally, I'm now getting some VST dropouts, hiccups, although not common. Might the drive move be the cause? Thanks." So, I would be inclined to say no. I mean, it could always be the cause. If, there's, but C, my guess would be that it might be an audio performance issue that you might have had on both drives. Generally, kind of playing content, unless it's like you're going from an SSD to some like really old IDE hard drive and it's just can't stream the samples fast enough. But I would say if it's going to be like a contemporary SSD drive, that the drive wouldn't be the issue. You might be just running into audio performance. If it is an external, like outside of the computer, make sure like an external, I think it's what Samsung, like a T5 drive or T7. I think they have a T5, T7, T9 maybe, where it's an external drive. That sometimes, make sure that you have, that you're not running it into a hub, that it's being connected directly to the computer, and make sure that the USB port that it's connected to doesn't do any, green energy efficient, energy saving modes in the BIOS if you're on Windows. But for the most part, it shouldn't be a problem. If it's an internal drive, I wouldn't think twice of it. If it's going to be an external drive, make sure that you don't have like any power saving options on the USB bus. All right. Kevin Crayford asks, "Hi Greg, I'm using a Korg Nano Studio with Cubase 14. Every time I move the faders, it auto selects the track. I have tried stopping this by disabling auto select in Mackie control, but it did not work." Okay, so if you have, let me just look at, so probably, let me just look at the device. It's a Nano Studio. Let me just look it up quickly so I get an idea what it looks like. I have something in my head. Just want to make sure that. All right, so it looks like it's the Nano Key Studio MIDI controller. Okay, so I would, so let me just jump back to the questions here. All right, so it says I've tried, every time I move the faders, it auto selects the track that I have tried stopping the auto select, but it didn't work. Except, see if, when we go to your studio setup, see if you, it could be, so if you have like a Mackie control here, make sure, because a lot of times I would probably, even though it may run as a Mackie control, I would probably not run it as a Mackie control. I would make sure, try to see if you do this, and if it says not connected, when you select Mackie control, try setting not connected and go to like the MIDI remote, and I would make a MIDI remote device, and there's probably a MIDI remote device for the Korg Nano. The Nano Studio. So like my Nano control automatically comes up here. Let's just see if there's like a MIDI device map for. So I think once you're here, because the Mackie control protocol isn't, it's kind of really old and does a lot of odd things like you're running into. So make sure, it could also be that your Nano Studio is not set in Mackie control mode. So you may have to like turn it on and hit these two buttons and it boots up in Mackie control or boots up in a normal MIDI controller mode. So make sure that the Nano Control itself or your Nano Studio is set to work in Mackie Control. But I would do, and let me just see if there's the Korg Nano Studio. So the Nano Control automatically works. So if you come over here, just go. I would get the Korg Nano Control Studio. I would, utilize this if it's, if, so I would download this if this is your Nano, if this is the Nano Control that you have, and this gives you tremendous more flexibility for mapping different elements instead of running Mackie Control. So I would not run anything. Personally, I wouldn't run a device under Mackie Control now. I would do everything, because Mackie Control, in all fairness, was a 2000, so it's a 25-year-old protocol that really hasn't been updated, and no one's really moving forward with it because Mackie's been acquired, but 4 or 5 times since then. So, I don't think anyone that was involved with the protocol is still at the company. I would doubt that. But, see if you could run it as a MIDI remote, and that will give you a lot more flexibility, and you wouldn't be running into the issues that you are. But make sure that your device is set to run in Mackie Control as opposed to a MIDI controller that's transmitting MIDI messages outside of the Mackie Control protocol. All right, so Michael Pierce is joining us from Grand Chapel Studios. He says, I bought everything for cold soup today, and the temp has dropped by 18 degrees Celsius. It could change quickly. All right, so we see from Netic Music, and it says under the chord track, yeah, so if it's this area, so there's not really, I don't see where there's, where it shows the relative minor or relative major of the key. Let me just see if, so, when you come here, we could set, so this is going to be our root key. So if I could say, I could set it to D Aeolian, I could set it to E Aeolian, but it doesn't necessarily change the root key. So if you're in, so if I come over here, I'm not sure where it shows the relative major or minor chord from that. So I don't think that is a function that you set the root key here and then whatever scale intervallic pattern based upon the current root key. But let me know if I'm missing something obvious. It's from Netic Music. All right, now you see a further comment from Netic Music. Says, are you able to see the major key below that C Aeolian? All right, so let's say if I come here, when I go to C major, now it's just going to play back the C major chord, and then when I go to Aeolian to the natural minor, then, so it's just C is kind of the tonic of the chord, but doesn't necessarily, so it's not turning the C Aeolian into the, to the relative other key. Okay. All right, so we also see from Netic Music, says, so when you expand a chord track to bigger, it'll show the major key below it. All right, so let's make this larger. So it looks like sizing that doesn't change it for me. All right. And let me just, maybe if I turn off adaptive voicings, but just clicking on it, so that will just show that with kind of the tonic of C. But let me know if I'm still doing something wrong. Netic Music, sorry for misunderstanding. All right, so we see Graham Witcher has to leave the live stream. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so Kyle says, thank you. Tried those same steps. Made reference to drum machine, just for example. Must be something in my file system. Some things will save, some won't. All right. Okay, so we see from Netic Music says, thank you, the automatic scales checkbox will do for now. All right. All right, so you see at Cubase, if I were to decide to aggregate, is there a word clock you'd recommend from use or even professionals who rely on it? I've looked into the past, but most seem 10 to 15 years old, so there's probably not a lot of word clocks. You know, it used to be like people that were synchronizing digital consoles and tape decks, digital multi-track recorders, ADATs, D88s, to like an O2R 96, O2Rs, DM2000s, other, you know, Sony Mini Oxford consoles, digital consoles, and synchronizers, that clocks were more prevalent. You know, companies that are known for clocks and have popular audio clocks could be Apogee with the Big Ben clock. Aardvark is still kind of highly regarded. You know, Aardvark had turned into Antelope Audio. So the founder, one of the founders of Aardvark had, I think, moved to Bulgaria or somewhere, and you know, started Antelope Audio. So Antelope Audio has a highly regarded clock as well. So, but make sure that all of your audio, you know, having a clock is great. But if the interfaces that you're going to use in an aggregate system don't have a way of receiving the clock, like a digital input or a BNC word clock connection, having a full clock isn't going to do any good if your audio interface only has analog inputs and outputs. So your audio, each of the audio interfaces need to have a way to get the clock, and then depending how many devices you have, you may have to go into further clock distribution, you know, to get clean clock to multiple devices. So, all right. So Michael Pierce has received 1 gallon of coconut almond fudge ice cream. Okay. All right, so we see Jazz Dude posted a link, says fix M2 SSD overheating, thermal pads, and putty to stop throttling. So thanks for sharing that, Jazz Dude. Okay. All right, so we see Val joining late, just came from a gig at a very, very nice opera house in Vienna. Wow, what a scenery. So I always want to go see classical performance or an opera in Vienna. It's one of my bucket list items. All right, and Val's looking forward to going through the timestamps later. All right. All right, so we see Val is in Bilbao, where Gareth lives. He says Bilbao was great, a lot of wine and nice people, very hot, but he had a great time. So, glad he got to go. All right, Jay Yarbrough Music asks about 3 outboard 500 series modules. Is there a way to set them up in Cubase? So if you wanted to, get audio in and out to the 500 series, you're going to need an audio interface with inputs and outputs to accommodate. Go to your studio menu to audio connections. And let's say we want to go to the external effects tab. So let's say you got like an outboard SSL mic pre, like a lunchbox. So we'll come over here. Let's add an external effect. We're going to say SSL mic pre. I think they have a great inexpensive one. And this is going to be mono in, mono out. Or let's say it's a compressor. So let's say just SSL comp. Okay, so we say mono in, mono out, and we'll hit OK. All right, so now we have our SSL compressor, and what we want to do is now to connect it to inputs and outputs on your audio interface. So we say, okay, we want to go in and out of output 3. So we'll just come here. So let's say we set our routing here. And then when we want to route out to it, we would just come over. Let's say, okay, we have an audio track. And we go to the inserts. We'll see it under external plugins. So now we could just say, okay, our SSL compressor. So what the signal is going to do now is it's going to go out into the hardware, get processed through the hardware. The output is going to go to, so we're taking the audio and like an output from your audio interface to the in of the hardware. The signal goes through and gets processed through the hardware. It's then sent back to an input on Cubase. Now, sometimes this path will cause a latency, and if we just click on measure delay, that will automatically calculate the delay and compensate for the outboard gear. So then once you have that done, when you hit play, everything will be in time. And when you go to export or render a file, it will be done in real time because it actually has to play and capture the source being run through the hardware. So once again, go to your studio menu, to audio connections, to external effects, add an external effect, tell it where it's going in and out of your audio interface, and at that point, load up the effect. And at that point, when you go to edit, you can just see the measured delay, and then just hit play, and the audio will go out through your hardware back in. All right, so you see Val just found a location for his concert he went to. Amazing. So. You see Michael Pierce sharing his soup recipe. All right, I think we are at the end of questions. We'll see if there's more questions that come in. We'll see if Val has questions now that he just joined the live stream. We'll see if there's other questions. I think we got through all of our questions that were mailed in. Let me just check. Yeah. Okay, so we see from Anthony Clark. All right, so we see From Anthony Clark asks, when importing drum samples, let's say kick drum, and have a MIDI file that has the kick pattern, how do I make the kick sample follow the MIDI file in the project, or should I use a VST for it? All right, so let's say I have, just do a new project here quickly. All right, so let me just... All right, let me just make a MIDI track here quickly. All right, so you will need to play it into like an instrument or a sampler, but we'll show you how to do it quickly. It's really easy. So let's say I have this, and we have a pattern. Let's say we'll just do a quick 4 on the floor. Okay, so we have this pattern of drums that we'll play. Okay, so, and I want to have a sample, so I'm going to add a sampler track. So, or I'll just come over here. Let's find a kick sample. All right, so let's see if we just have one shots in here. Okay. All right, so let's say I want this pattern to play. I would just come over here. Let's create a sampler track. And now I could just come right over here, drag that pattern. And then if we want to try different samples, so that's really kind of all you have to do, and you could set kind of the root note here. So let's say, okay, I'll make this my root note of C1. So this way you could just kind of, so this way the sampler track, so take that MIDI pattern, come over here, drag the pattern. You probably want to change the sample to root note of like C1, and then copy that to the sampler track. So again, you could just come over here, right click, create a sampler track, move the pattern down, set like the root key roughly to like whatever pitch you want it in the MIDI file, and now it'll just kind of play back just like that. So generally you need an instrument that will play back. You could do it in a sampler track. You could also, if you have Groove Agent SE open, I could come over here. Groove Agent SE is another great use for this. And I could just say, okay, I want to take this pattern, and I could just come right over here and drag it to C1 if I don't have it muted. And you could just kind of drag right there. So 2 great tools to do it. You could do it with 3. You could also do it in the drum machine if you wanted to. So if we add a drum machine track, so let's create a drum track, and now I could just come over and drop this to a pad, take this pattern, and so you can do it in the drum machine, sampler track, or Groove Agent, but it's really just kind of drag, drop, copy the MIDI data to output to that instrument, and then you'll be all set, Anthony. All right, so we see Jay Yarbrough Music just says thank you, so you're welcome. All right, you see Mark Raven just says, Greg, please know we all get off the live stream and go, oof, I should have asked, or we go play with Cubase and find a bunch of questions. So, all right, so Val's question is, so I do this playback management. I was wondering if there's a way of setting that makes playback stop after an event, circle, marker, etc. It says, thanks, Greg's about to type it. So let's say we have a marker here. Okay, so I'll just add a marker track. Okay. So one of the things that you could do is just say, okay, I want to, let's come here. Let's say, okay, I'll take this and I'll mute this for expediency's sake. But there is, if we get to transport, I think we could just say play project range, and I think we could play, I think there's a play to like play to next marker. Yeah, play until next marker, so we could just play. And you could obviously assign a keyboard shortcut to that. So let's say if we go to play project range, play until next marker, then stop. So you could just, have a button on your MIDI remote to just do that. So if I want to come here, let's say I go to my Korg Nano control and I want this button to play until next marker. So now if I just come right over here, I have that assigned. I could just say, okay, play. So again, you could have keyboard shortcuts for it. You could change your space bar to do that if you wanted to. But again, under play project range, play until next marker. So, or you could choose to play selection. So if you have just an event selected here, let's go to your transport and play selection. So if we just have that set up, so if you have just an event, we could just come again right over here on play project range, play selection if you want, and that would just play the selected file and stop. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Val. Okay. Okay, so I see Jazz Dude posted a video on guitar parallel processing, so I'll check that out maybe after. Okay, reading through comments. Yeah, so we see Val just says, thanks, Greg. I'll hit the play to next marker. Maybe I'll find Stream Deck shortcuts to jump to next marker too. So yeah, you could actually program a macro and have the macro play to next marker, go to next marker, and All right, and we see just from Val, it says, thanks, Greg. This is exactly what I needed. That's great. All right. All right, so you see Michael Teams has to run. All right. You see Sable likes the video that Jazz Dude shared, and Val just says that's perfect. All right, so we'll see if there's any other questions that sneak in. Everyone's getting smart with their Cubase and getting some really interesting questions. It's great to see. All right, we'll get. I know it's usually about 20 seconds from when I talk to and everyone else hears it, so we'll just wait a little bit, see if there's other questions that sneak in. All right, you see Roland Stuff says, thanks for answering all my questions today, Greg. So helpful as always. Glad to help. All right, so we see Bratman Studio says, I think there's something invisible about my question. I've placed it a bunch. Do you see this? So I don't see it, so maybe the question, there's usually like a 200 character limit for the YouTube comments. If you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'll take a quick look for it now, Rick. So if you want to send it out, I'll keep my eyes open for it. Let's see if we get Rick's email. Or Rick, if you're in the Cubase Nation Discord, maybe you can post it there and Jazz Dude can paste it in. Okay. All right. So maybe, okay. So you see from Bratman Studio, it just says, did a swing feel quantized and sounded bad? All right. So let me just take a look at, so let's say if we want to do, I'll do like generic drum program here. Okay, so let's just do like a quick pattern here. Just program quick beat. All right, here, let me just. All right, so say if I want to now put in just. I'll just tweak some velocities here so it's not super extra annoying. All right, so let's say, so we want to do a swing on this. All right, so let's say, All right, so I'm just going to go to like my quantize settings. Let's say this is pretty annoyingly unswung. All right, so let me undo that. So I want to do more 16th notes. So let me reset to quantize. I'm going to go to my quantize panel. All right, so I'm going to now come over and we'll adjust our swing amount. So let's just try like in 68. So we come over here. So obviously we hear it more on hi-hats, but we just did. So let me know, Rick, if that's how you're doing this swing. But you know, sometimes you may have to try just different percentages of the swing, and you could get a sense visually what it's going to be doing. So if I did a reset quantize, you know, we can see that we're going from there, and we'll go back. So if we just apply that quantize like an eighth note swing, that we can make it sound good. Sounds okay. All right. All right, so Secret Squirrel Studios says, happen to catch my word clock recommendations questions. So yeah, we did it. So, you know, popular word clocks, check out like Antelope Audio, check out like Apogee's Big Ben. There hasn't been like a major clock released, I think, in a while. So, all right, so we see from the artist knows love. Thank you for everything, Greg. Thank you, Jazzy, for support. Be safe, everyone. All right. Let's see, Sable's looking at the Nano Control Studio right now. So we see a nice comment from Mark Rabin. Says his community has improved me as a person, musician, a father, and dog owner, and I'm making better music. Huge and real gratitude. That's so wonderful to hear. Thanks for sharing your insights, and it's always great to have you, and especially Stella. We love having Stella on the live streams. All right, Jukurtha Studio asks, hello, I'm moving contents of my Cubase VSTs to another hard drive. I can no longer find them in Halion Sonic, for example, the Verve Piano. So make sure that the trick is when you go whatever location that you have the VST sound file in, kind of come over to like your Finder. We just look for, so go to your location. So I'm going to come over here. So let me just. All right, so let's say if I look for a VST sound file. Okay, so wherever you copied them to, just double click, and you want to basically open it with the Steinberg Library Manager. And then once you open it with the Steinberg Library Manager, so if I come over here, I'll say, okay, let's open it with the Steinberg Library Manager. We may get this. Now, what you can do is, you know, if it tries to copy it into your older location, just choose register in place. And then that will automatically tell the Steinberg Library Manager that this is where the file is every time that we go to look for Verve, look in this particular location. So once you kind of make that link, you know, and instead of copying it into your folders, probably a reason that you're copying it to a new location, all you have to do at that point, open up the Steinberg Library Manager after double clicking on it and just register in place, and then Cubase knows where to look for that content for the instruments. All right. Okay. So see, Chastity says, Buddy Rich approves this. All right, for the swing. All right. I hope it was a swing. All right. Mark Rabin just asked, can we have a focus session on cymbals and how best to treat them when electronic? Because this is missing from my knowledge. So the one thing that I would always do, so let's say if we're in Groove Agent here, and we'll load up just, let's do kind of an interesting one. We'll do some Simon Phillips, because he always makes great choices. He's kind of a good drummer. All right, so let's say we'll come over here to Groove Mix. All right, so a lot of times, some of the giveaways for cymbals, and there's actually, if you're using Groove Agent, there's actually a setting where instead of always playing the cymbal like at the end of a pattern, so we can see that this is going to be, this particular pattern is going to be, so long that we don't always want it to play the cymbal at the beginning. So maybe when we do a fill, so sometimes, making sure that the giveaway can be the giveaway can be that cymbals are always going to be, I think people make cymbals too loud and people use cymbals too often. So don't, kind of be judicious with your cymbal. If you want it to sound like a real drums, sometimes, if you're doing like an AC/DC type project, every time there's a chord change, they may like write an A, and then they go to, the 4 chord or the 5 chord, and then, to emphasize the chord change, they may hit a cymbal crash. But don't do a cymbal crash like every 4 measures. Do a cymbal crash, to kind of highlight a change, to kind of bring attention to a change. It's like, and it's always good, like if you're programming drums and you're doing a 16 measure verse, if you kind of commit it to a good rule of thumb, if you commit it to the hi-hat, stay on the hi-hat throughout the whole verse. Don't do like 4 measures on a hi-hat, then switch to the ride and go back to the hi-hat because you got bored playing the hi-hat and you can't figure it out. So as a musician, it's like when you go to the ride, you have to stick, as a drummer, stick to the ride for the whole part of the song if you went there. So try to, use cymbals judiciously. Don't do it every 4 or every 8 measures. It's kind of like a drum machine giveaway was, people like, programming a beat, after a while wasn't so hard, but doing drum fills could be more challenging. So people would often do the same, would have a whole song, and then every drum fill would be the same drum fill with the same cymbal crash, and that was kind of the giveaway a lot of times. And sometimes when people are programming hi-hats and cymbals, I think when people are programming drums, tend to be too loud and too obvious instead of kind of settling into the kit. So that's some advice I would give if you're trying to make it sound more like a particular live drummer would. Okay. But let me know if there's another avenue discussion you want, Mark. All right, so we see Bratman Studio, Rick's rebooted Chrome, so hopefully that will solve his issues. All right, so we see Val says, okay, got my Stream Deck set up. Thanks, Greg. It took about 5 minutes work. All right, it's awesome. All right. All right, so we see from Secret Studios says, thank you so much, Greg. You're the knees. All right. Thank you for the kind words. All right, Chris Higginson asks, hi, Greg, how can I change the root key and chord pads from major to minor? Thanks. So the root key, doesn't imply major or minor. It's just kind of the tonality, the root tonality. So if we're in, let's make sure it's the chord pads. The question was, Okay. So, the root key is set up so that whatever chord progression, so if it's major or minor or not, so if we have this, our root key is set to C. But when we come here, we could say now it's going to be D. It's going to be, the key of E or F. So this doesn't imply major or minor, just where the tonal root key is. So it's, think of the root key as an individual key as opposed to the key signature. So if we have this set up, let's say if we come over to, I think I made like a major chord. Maybe done it on my old, so if I'm here, we could see, okay, this is C minor. When I come here, it's now going to be all transposed up to D minor. So it's going to keep the relative, it's not going to change the chords, but kind of the tonal basis for the chords. So that's what the project root key is. So it's not necessarily the key signature, but just the actual tonal root of the key, just a single pitch. Okay. All right, so we see Jugurtha Studios as well. Thank you very much. So you're welcome. All right, so we see from Mark Rabin, it says, I noticed the Simon Phillips Jazz has samples for cymbals, but the electronic cymbal sound is killing me. So if you have, one of the things that you could do, and I think, Mark, you have the full Groove Agent. Like what I used to do, like in the early 90s, way back when, working in a budget studio, is I would use electronic drums, but I would record real cymbals. So I had a real hi-hat, I had a real ride, crash cymbals, but the drums themselves were completely electronic. So if you want to use, so let's say if you had the full Groove Agent, this is like a perfect case to come over here and say, okay, I want Agent 1 to be an electronic kit. So let's load a kit. We'll come over here, say beat agent kit. So I have, let's say come over here and we'll have our, like drums that have like a lot of impact, but I could have a second agent. And here I want this to be, so let's say, looking at this agent here, we go to the crash, not as good as like an acoustic crash. So if I want to come over here, I could go to like the studio kit and I could use the crash cymbals from this kit, but the kick and snare from this kit. So we can mix and match your different drums so that, so even now if I want to come over here, we'll say, okay, I want this C sharp, I want to crash. From there, I could go to this kit and let's say, okay, I want to do just a quick drum part, and I want to, and this is the beauty of the full Groove Agent, is that you have the kind of the hybrid nature. So we could just come over here and say, okay, I want, let's say my kick All right, so I'll just come over here. So let's say we want to do, all right, let me just set my, Sorry. All right, so let's say we'll take this, and now I want to put, and let's say we have our C#1 crash, or C#. All right, so now all I have to do is, if we have this set as kind of a drum track, so let's take this particular sound here, and let's go to, we'll get our drum map from instrument. So I want to now take the crash that's here, and we could put this to channel 2. So when we come right over here, we could just change that channel. So you could use kind of, or put it onto different tracks, but use like, and then use like the Simon Phillips crash to make it more realistic. So give that a try, Mark. All right, so we see from Vincent, great to see you on. Welcome back. It says, somehow I did not seem to find my invoice regarding my purchase of Cubase 14. Since March, any knowers of whether you can access invoices in your account? So I think, when you do it, it's through Fast Spring is the online store, but check in your My Steinberg account. So if you come over here, so let's go to, your web browser and go to steinberg.net. And then you could log into your My Steinberg account and see if, it's listed in here. Like I still have some vouchers I could use. But check out like your products here and see if, if you come over and, see if it's listed in there. And if not, if you could email me and I could probably get it figured out for you, and make sure you tell me what country you're in so I can send it to the right people. But always check your email. All right, so we have Sound Foundry Studios is always late to the live, catch up on the way. So we're glad you made it, and thanks for joining us today, being part of the community. All right, Roland Stuff says, quick extra question, if I may. Does Cubase have the same functionality on Android device as it does on Apple's phone and pad, and is there a minimum screen size to use it properly? So I have a Samsung phone. I think I installed it on my phone. I just got a new phone recently. So bigger screens are always good, but lots of people are running it. So I'm just booting up my Cubase 3 now. So if we want to go to quick demo here. All right, and now I'm just playing Cubase's back right here on my phone. So I just have a Galaxy S24 FE. So I can open up my keyboard and play the keyboard with my fingers, kind of as expected. So even on a phone, it seems to be running much better than I thought it would. All right. All right. All right, so we see from Bratman Studio says, "Hey Greg, what about creating your own sample symbols and adding them to pads to get a more real sustain?" So definitely you could do that, but there's lots of great long cymbal samples that already come in Groove Agent. But sometimes when you're mimicking or trying to mimic the behaviors of vintage drum machines where they had, at least 16K of memory for all the samples, then we try to mimic that authentically. All right. And Bratman Studio says, "Yeah, can we add samples to Groove Agent 5? So certainly. So all you have to do, like if you have a Beat Agent kit, just come over here. And we could just drag and drop any sample right onto Groove Agent, just like so. So if I come over here. So whether it's a cymbal sample or a drum or kick or vocal or guitar, you can just add it right into Groove Agent. Okay, see if we have... All right, we just got a couple minutes left. Mark Rabin asked, "Greg, if you could make everyone learn one keyboard shortcut, what would it be?" I think Alt plus P, Alt or Option plus P, which will come over here, play the track and loop it. So if I come here, I could just loop that track. So that's always a good one, Alt or Option plus P. See, Val just says, "Dude, I'm just so happy to be a Cubase user." All right, that's great to hear. All right, so we see JMax Studios. This is John from Kenya joining us. Thanks for being on. All right, so we see we have another minute or two left. Thanks for all the great questions. Hope that everyone, and Jazz Dude saying Alt plus P is also his favorite keyboard shortcut. So we see Roland Stubb says, "I heard somewhere that there's things you could do on Cubase on an Apple device that you couldn't on an Android device." I think the applications are the same. I think on Apple devices there are different like third-party plugins that are available. All right, so we see Mark Rabin just says Alt/Option plus P for the win. Remember that one. We see Val just says, "Thanks for your help, Greg." And F8, I changed to lower windows on and off, so it's good. Yeah, I always say that, like, if you find yourself going menu, a lot of times when I'm running Cubase on live streams, I kind of show it in the menu, because if I just do a keyboard shortcut, it doesn't really help a lot of people having a window pop up. But if you find yourself doing different things, try to say, "Oh, I come here a lot," see if there's a keyboard shortcut and learn that keyboard shortcut. All right. See, Michael Pierce says Control Shift plus C as a custom keyboard shortcut for opening lanes in all selected tracks. That's a good one to have. All right. See, Michael Graybill says, "And I learned about Alt P today." Awesome. Thanks, Greg. All right. All right, so we're just about out of time. I want to thank everyone for being on the live stream. We'll see everyone back on Friday. Everyone stay safe and healthy, and thanks for all the great questions. Goodbye.